that. But yeah, today we're going to be starting a study of a really small book that I didn't intend to start the year with this series at all until a few weeks ago. In my own personal reading, I was going through a book of reading through the Bible kind of plan that I'm behind on, obviously, from last year because I'm not through the Old Testament yet. But I got to this little book of Habakkuk. It's kind of hard to say Habakkuk, but man, it just the first chapter was just like, dude, this is where we're living. We need to talk about this again, and because Habakkuk was a guy that had a lot of questions, a lot of kickback. And if you notice, there's a lot of things in this world that can cause us to raise a lot of questions as well. Maybe you've noticed, there's simple, difficult questions maybe you've wrestled with too, like why do they say, like my alarm clock went off this morning, when it actually came on, right? Confusing. You've probably heard, like, why do they call it a driveway when you park in it, but they call it a parkway when you drive on it? Backwards, right? Why do people, maybe you slept like a baby last night. Anybody had babies kind of know that's, what are you talking about? Babies wake up like every hour or two. Well, if you were to throw a cat out of a window, is that kitty litter? I've never thrown a cat out of a window. I can already feel the emails coming. Anyway, but it does remind me of this book of the Bible we're talking about, because every time you say Habakkuk, it kind of sounds like a cat coughing up a hairball, right? Habakkuk. The name of the book, unless you're from other parts of the world, as Emily was kind of having trouble, you might call it Habakkuk. If you're from the South. Habakkuk. But the driving question of this little book of Habakkuk, depending on where you're from, Habakkuk, whatever, there's a driving question that Habakkuk wanted to know. And it was basically, okay, God, where are you? Like, God, are you even aware of what's going on? Have you abandoned us? God, what is going on? Why doesn't God seem fair? And maybe you've asked questions like that before, probably recently, right? In fact, look at just verses 1 and 2, or 2 or 3 of chapter 1. You see this version of Habakkuk's question. He asked God, how long? How long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you don't listen. Violence is everywhere, I cried, but you don't come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? I mean, it's just raw, right? Just the emotion, the realness of his questions. And if you fast forward through this Old Testament book to today, I mean, we ask these kind of questions all the time, right? Maybe we're a little afraid to verbalize them, but you've thought these kind of things. You've had to. God, why is it that, like, the bad people, the people that don't honor you, the people that don't even care, why are they seeming to thrive so much, but good people, like all these bad things keep happening to good people? Why is it, I work so hard and I'm honest in what I do, right? And I show up and I do my job, and then this jerk over here who's just kissing up and doing all this other stuff, he's the one getting promoted. He's the one getting ahead, right? Why is it the person that does all kinds of bad stuff and doesn't care about their health, right? They live to 102 or something, but this good, healthy Christian father dies at 42 of COVID. What's up with that, God? Why is it we've tried to raise our kids right? I mean, we really did. We did the right things. And we really did a good job and to our best, but now our kids are just messed up and going their own way. But it's like these parents over there that don't even seem involved at all. Their kids are doing great. What's up with that? How come I really do try to do what your word says? I try to understand you, God. I try to do the best I know how. I try to do what your word says with my money, with the right things, and I'm still not being blessed, and I'm still in debt, and I'm not seeing any fruits of it, God. And someone else, okay, they're just greedy, and they seem to have more than they need. God, what's up with that? How come someone, when they pray, it's like, you seem to do things immediately. But when I pray and I cry out and I pray and I pray and I pray and I pray, you don't do anything. How come I have these headaches that just won't go away? How come I have to keep suffering through depression, right? Why am I struggling so much through this pandemic, and other people, they don't even seem like they have much faith, and yet nothing's changed for them. If anything, some of them are even getting better. There's supposed to be a light at the end of this tunnel, right? We're holding on to hope best we can, and I'm trying to keep moving forward and trusting you, God, but it's like the tunnel just keeps getting longer and the light keeps getting farther away, and God, it seems like you could do something, but you don't. Why? I mean, why don't you seem fair? So now, as we look at this story of Habakkuk, you should know, okay, this guy had these questions, but this was a guy who was incredibly in love with God. Okay, this wasn't like a dude, his faith was weak. His commitment was not shallow. He had a very strong faith, but he, just like a lot of people, just like me in times in my life, he crashed head on into a crisis of faith. That being the things that he saw, they're just not lining up with what I say or want to believe. And that was a really, really difficult season for him, and he documented it in this book. And many of you, I know, can relate to this. Now, just real quick, okay, Habakkuk, he's known as one of the 12 minor prophets, if you've ever studied. There's 12 of these little books in the back of the Old Testament. I don't know why they called them the minor prophets. Maybe they didn't make it to the majors or something, right? They never got the Nike contract or sports drink, whatever. Habakkuk is one of these little 12. And we actually know less about Habakkuk than any of the other minor prophets. We don't know much about him at all. We know that he was most likely like a temple musician. And then at some point, he became a priest and then a prophet. In the most basic sense, okay, think about a prophet as someone who speaks on behalf of God. And these guys were in the Old Testament. There wasn't a written word of God like we had today, so this is how God spoke. And Habakkuk lived during a time where God's people were becoming very, very corrupt. Increasingly, there was violence everywhere. There was corruption everywhere. Right? Thankfully, we don't live in a world like that anymore. But there were bad people doing bad things to good people, and nobody would do anything about it. And even the good people weren't all that good. And so God speaks to this prophet, and he says, okay, these people that I love, they're becoming increasingly wicked. I've given them chance after chance after chance. And for your own collective good, to try to teach you to trust me, I'm going to throw the gauntlet at you. That's what he told Habakkuk. And what you need to understand, God said, is I'm going to take a far worse people than even you're acting like, and those who are much more evil than you, I'm going to use them to crush you. And of course, Habakkuk's like, what? I mean, no. That doesn't seem right at all. Why the word? What are you even talking about, God? That's why, okay, perhaps Habakkuk's name actually literally means this. It means to wrestle. It means to embrace. Unless you're from the South, you might say wrestle, right? We get into the Habakkuk and wrestling. But Habakkuk wrestled with God through this whole story. But we also watch him embrace God through some really, really difficult times. So, as we looked at this story, we try to apply it to this season that we're still kind of going through, right? And what we can learn about it, trying to climb our way out of the dip. What you're not going to get in the story of Habakkuk is what some people have called a sitcom sermon. You grow up watching sitcoms. You know, there's a lot of Netflix now bringing some of them back. Like some of my favorites, Silver Spoons. Anybody remember this? Is going way back. How many remember Silver Spoons or Different Strokes? What you talking about, Willis, right? Brady Bunch, here's the story. Three's Company, you watch Three's Company? Your mom and dad let you watch that? Wow. My mom wouldn't let me watch it because they ran around in their underwear and called them shorts and stuff, so we didn't get to watch that kind of thing. Wasn't allowed. But okay, what would happen in a sitcom is this. Okay, there'd be a little bit of humor, right? There'd be some tension in the plot. Something has to get resolved. And then within 30 minutes, including all the commercials and everything else, right, everything would get neatly tied, put a bow on it, everything's solved and happy until the next week, right? You're not going to get that kind of story in Habakkuk, even though it's a really small book. In fact, you're going to get kind of the opposite. Something more like, in my opinion, resembles real life, right? There's some tension. There's some drama. But there's plenty of unanswered questions too. And so with that kind of foundation, I want to dive into this book. We'll start chapter 1, verse 1. This is how he actually started out. He said, this is the message that the prophet Habakkuk received in a vision. And this word vision in this verse, it's the word masa. It basically means a burden. Okay? What God gave the prophet was a burdensome message. This was heavy. The kind of message that's going to make him go, God, listen, I don't want to tell the people this. I don't like this. They're not going to like this. I don't see anything good in this, God. That's the kind of vision message. In fact, he's going to push back on God. He's the only one of these 12 minor prophets that actually pushes back and argues with God. And he gets right up in God's business in verses 3 and 4. He says, must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? Like wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. I'm surrounded by people who love to argue and fight. Sounds like he's been on Facebook or something, right? Sound familiar? He goes on in verse 4. He says, the law has become paralyzed. There's no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous, so justice has become perverted. I mean, he could be writing this today, right? As far as he sees, nothing's turning out fair. Nothing's right. Where are you, God? Basically, if you're taking notes here, Habakkuk has three major problems with God. Three arguments, three issues that might echo what maybe you've thought but just been afraid to say. Let's try to summarize them. Right? The first one, he's saying, God, you don't seem to care. Like, I thought you cared, but you're letting all these things go on in the world that don't seem fair. You must not even care. His second complaint to God is this: you're not doing very much when you could. You've ever said that? You've thought that? I mean, there's a little bit of faith in this, though, right? This is at the very least, I'm telling God, listen, I believe you could. Right? You're all powerful. I believe you could do something. You could do this one little thing that would change everything, right? You could heal people. You could provide. You could do more than you are. I believe that. I do. I mean, if I were in your shoes, I would do it. I don't know why you won't do it. You must not care, and you're not doing much when you could. And then his number 3 argument with God was, what you are doing, that doesn't even seem right. I don't get it. In other words, what Habakkuk is saying, okay, God, if I were in your shoes, I would be doing things totally different. Now, be honest. How many of you, raise your hand? If you're at home, go ahead and play along too. How many of you have ever thought anything like this? Wow, that's actually more than I thought would admit that. Like, that's kind of scary. I mean, you're in church too. Like God's house, you just admitted, God, I don't like the way you're doing it. I mean, is that even legal? Because, like, if I were a prophet, I'd be afraid, like, God's going to give you flat tire hemorrhoids or something later on. It's just admitting that kind of doubt. Like, you're not allowed to do that. I mean, that's just, you know, and in my mind, that's what I'm thinking, right? I know what I'm supposed to believe, but if I'm really being honest, you know, is God going to punish me? Is God going to be angry with me for thinking, for admitting that? Is it even appropriate to say, God, I don't understand? I'm not sure I like this. Doesn't that mean I don't have faith? Is that fair game at all? Well, in my opinion, okay, if you look at the whole of Scripture, it's absolutely fair and even right and helpful sometimes to question God. Now, stay with me here, okay? Because, in fact, I don't only think it's fair game, but there are times when questioning God, when wrestling with God could become a significant part of your faith journey. Maybe the beginning of it, right? I mean, just read through the Psalms sometimes if you've never had. There's some rawness in there. I mean, David sometimes, the way he kicks back and prays to God, right? Like, not just against my enemies, but like 3 generations of my enemies. God, just wipe them out. God, where are you at? Why am I running for my life? I've done everything right. What are you doing? Right? 1/3 of the Psalms are basically people crying out to God. What are you doing here? God, come rescue me. God, are you leaving me here forever? What's up? Read the book of Job, right? You remember his story? Read Lamentations. These are very godly people crying out, God, have mercy. God, I thought I did everything you said, and now what's going on? Then if that's not good enough, just go over to the New Testament. Look at Jesus himself on the cross, became sin in our place, and his Father turns his back on him. And you remember what Jesus said? Why? Why have you forsaken me? In fact, so many people, I think, are afraid to bring sincere, honest questions to God, and I would argue that sometimes a very important part of your faith journey would be to bring your very honest questions to God. Now, here's where a lot of people are, okay? Here's the question. What do you do, though? What do you do when what you see with your eyes is so different than what you believe or you say you want to believe in your heart? And isn't that exactly where a lot of us find ourselves right now? A lot of different situations. 2020 brought this question right to the surface for a lot of people, didn't it? And this, you see, was Habakkuk's foundational question. Let me kind of explain it to you like this. I read a book, it's been years ago, it's an older book. Any of you ever read The Dip by Seth Godin? It's a nice little, small little book. But in this book, he writes a lot of good books, a good blog. But he uses this chart. Here, I'll put it up for you. In his book, to kind of explain something. We're gonna use it a little bit differently, but the principle's kind of the same. And so I want to give him credit. But let's say, okay, using his chart, back over here on the left, This is a person who is without Christ, hasn't made that first step to follow Jesus yet, right? Maybe that's you right now. You're a person that okay, God's doing something in your life. You're curious. You're investigating because the cool thing is many of you might be here, or you might be watching this because God is reaching out to you, and you're listening. You're open. You're softening to Him. And at some point, okay, God's Spirit gets a hold of your heart. He changes something in you, and you're going, all right, God, I believe you're real. You take that step of baptism, right? You commit. God, I'm giving you my life. I trust you for the bigger story. And I believe your son is the Son of God. I surrender to you. And like, boom, all of a sudden you're on the incline, right? Your spiritual life starts to grow. Things in other parts of your life starting to make better sense, right? Your life changes. All of a sudden you're different. Like you start to get on this little spiritual high. You're praying, and it seems like God's answering your prayers, right? I mean, you're having all these God moments in your life, and you're seeing God in places you didn't see Him before, and your friends are like, hey, man, you're weird, but we kind of like it. You know, something's different, something's cool will happen, and you're coming like, you know, I hope so. And you're making changes in your life, and you're growing. Your trajectory is going in the right direction. You listen to messages, and you're like, dude, that's for me. Your favorite song's always on the radio, right? Sunshine, you know, butterflies, and all of that, right? You go to Hy-Vee, there's a parking spot right at the front. You're like, yes, thank you, God. Everything's just awesome. But before too long, right, you're on the peak, you go to church. Yeah, Dennis was kind of off today. Didn't really speak to me. That's weird. Okay, you get in your car and nothing sounds good. That's weird. I'm praying. I'm still doing my daily time with God, but God's not listening like He used to. It doesn't seem like anyways. Not really anything happening. What's going on? And then one day someone you love gets sick and they don't get better. Or someone you care about gets in an accident. Things don't turn out the way you thought they should. And so you start to dip. You start to go into your own little crisis of faith. God, you're not doing what I thought you would be doing. You could be doing more and you're not. And God, I thought we were here, and now, you know, I was trusting you, but what I see is very different than what I thought. Not even really sure what I believe anymore. And typically when that happens, you want to go in two different directions. A lot of people want to revert. They want to go back. I want to get back on the mountain, right? I want to get back to the place I was before. I want to go back there, right? Or you go in the opposite direction where I just white knuckle my way through it. And regardless of what I see in front of me, no, God, I'm just going to believe it until it happens, right? I'm not going to have a negative confession. I'm healed, and I'll just believe I'm healed until I'm healed, or I'll just believe it until it happens. And you lost your job, and you're like, no, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, if I'm going to get a job, I'm just going to believe God's going to provide a job, and almost go into this kind of denial about reality. You know, others get mad. They're like, all right, God, I thought you were good. I thought all that stuff was great, but you're not, so forget it. I was wrong. They go right back to the first part, which is, okay, if this is how it's going to be, God, if nothing's going to ever change, you're not going to do what I thought you would do, then you must not be who I thought you were, so forget it, God. And right about now, okay, some of you might be thinking of someone on this curve. Yeah, others of you, it might be you, okay? Something happened. Life threw you a curve, and you got hurt, or someone did something to you, or something out of your control just doesn't make sense. Something let you down. Someone let you down. God didn't answer your prayer, and you're like, you know what? Forget it. And you go all the way back to the beginning. So what do you do? What do you do when what you see in life is not consistent with what the preacher's talking about and what you thought you believed, and you're not sure what you even think about God, not sure if that's even fair to talk about, right? Well, you can go backwards. You can go the more difficult road of trying to just white-knuckle your way through it, or you can make a really, really difficult decision, which is to say, God, I don't like it. I don't understand it, but I'm going to choose to trust you. Not necessarily because I see it, but because I'm choosing to do it. I'm choosing to trust you. Maybe it's just because that's the only option I feel like I have right now. But I'm choosing to trust you. And God may take you on a journey. Let me just tell you right now, it doesn't mean things are going to get better right away either. They might get worse, and things might get even more painful. And you might even have more faith struggles. And I'm speaking from what I know. But, okay, if you continue to stick with God, if you continue to making the hard choice, God, I do believe there's a bigger story. I do believe that you are good in spite of what I see. God, I do choose to trust you. No matter what he does around you, I can assure you, if you hold on to him at some point, he's going to take your faith to a place of intimacy, of closeness, of realness that you've never experienced before. But there's really no other way to get there many times without going through the dip. That's the only place God has a chance to prove himself to us many times. God may be lovingly allowing you to go through a season of doubts, of questioning, of fear, of even hurt, insecurity, unanswered questions, because he's doing something in you that he couldn't do any other way. He's taking you to a different plateau. And some of you, you're right here right now, right? You're right square in the dip. And where is this? This is chapter 1 of Habakkuk. You don't know what you believe right now. You're in the middle of chapter 1, and too many people, this is where they check out on God. And let me just say this really plainly, okay? Chapter 1 is all about wondering, God, where are you? God, what are you doing? And that can be a really, really important part of your faith journey. That's not something to ignore. It's not something to walk away from. It's something to wrestle with. That's where Habakkuk was. God, what are you doing? I don't understand. And God responded, and what God said was not what Habakkuk wanted to hear. I want you to look at God's response. God said back, okay, you want to answer? Here it is. The Lord replied, look around the nations. Look and be amazed. I'm doing something in your own day, something you wouldn't believe even if someone told you about it. I'm about to blow your mind in some ways that you wouldn't even, you couldn't understand right now if I tried to explain it to you. Wow, okay. What was that, right? What's God going to do? He says this. He says, I'm raising up the Babylonians. All right, now here's the rules. I've wrapped this up today, okay? Anytime I say Babylonians, it's your job to boo and hiss, okay? Well, make sure you're with me on this. Because if God would have said this to these people at this time, they'd be like, ooh, boo, right? We hate the Babylonians. We hate them. Like God was going to use, kind of think if God was going to use the Chargers to like crush the Chiefs later, right? You think about it, just make them better. They're going to be a better team for it in the long run. No, we don't want to hear that, right? So let's try it, okay? Make sure we're on the same page. God says, I'm raising up the Babylonians. Awesome, great, right? A cruel and violent people. Now listen to God talk about it. He says, they will march across the world and conquer other lands. These people are thieves, he said. The Babylonians, right, yeah, you guys are better than that. Babylonians, right, Chargers, yeah, they are notorious for their cruelty. Do whatever they like. Right? They're known for this stuff. Their horses are swifter than cheetahs, fiercer than wolves at dusk. Wow. Their charioteers charge from far away like eagles. They swoop down to devour their prey. They're like, these guys are predators. Here's the story, okay, Habakkuk. You're kind of bad. You guys are going in the wrong direction. These jokers are much, much worse, right? We hear you, God. And all of you hate them. You hate the Babylonians. But I'm going to use, there we go, right on. Yes. I'm going to use them to crush you. And Habakkuk's like, what? Right? I mean, put yourself in this story if you can. You'd be like, that's crazy. That's not even remotely right. God, that we're not that bad. So here's the deal. Okay, what do you do when you're in the middle of chapter 1? You're not even sure what you believe. You're already kind of doubtful. You want to believe. I mean, you really want to have faith. You want to believe there's a bigger story at play, but you got so many questions. Nothing seems to be going the right way. What I see is not adding up. Can you still be a believer? Can I still follow Jesus with all these questions? Here, I want you to write this down. You text it to yourself. I want you to get this, okay? Here's something I hope that'll be really freeing for a lot of you. A deeply committed believer can express simultaneous questions in faith. Believer in Jesus, believer in whatever. You can both at the same time have a lot of doubts and questions, be wrestling with some stuff, and still have faith. I hope that sets you free. A deeply committed believer at the same time can believe God and yet still be a little bit unsure about some stuff. I mean, it's like the famous question one man asked Jesus, if you remember. He said, Lord, I believe. Help me with my unbelief. Both. And that's exactly what God and Habakkuk are going to wrestle with. Let me wrap this up. Verse 12, watch this Habakkuk. He does this. Simultaneous faith and questions. O Lord, my God, my Holy One, you who are eternal, surely you don't plan to wipe us out, right? I believe there's something at play, okay? I don't see it right now. This doesn't make a bit of sense to me, but I'm choosing to trust you. It's a statement of faith. But then he questions again. He questions. He goes back to kind of raising his fist to God a little bit. O Lord, our rock, you've sent these Babylonians, there we go. These Babylonians correct us to punish us for our many sins. But you're pure. You can't stand the sight of evil. So why will you wink at their treachery? How are you going to use evil people to teach us about following you and being holy? Right? Should you be silent while the wicked swallow up people more righteous than they are? God, why are they prospering and you're crushing us? God, I believe, okay, I trust you. I know there's a bigger story, but right now, man, it's just hard. It's difficult. Some things just don't make sense to me right now. And some of you, that's right where you're at. This is where you are. You're in chapter 1. You're wrestling. Life isn't making sense. And I got bad news for you. I want you to come back next week. Chapter 2 isn't much better. Number 1, okay, you're wondering, you're questioning. Step 2, you're waiting. And you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're waiting. Now, chapter 3, though, if you continue to stick with this, you continue to stick with God into chapter 3, you'll come to a point, no matter what you see around you, no matter what the circumstances are, you get to a point like Habakkuk where he actually worships God. In the middle of it, his questions aren't even answered yet, but he begins to worship God, not just because of what he sees around you, not what you see with your own eyes, but because of who you are learning God to be. Who you know God to be. And how do you know God is who he is? Because you went through the dip with God. He taught you that in a place he couldn't teach you that anywhere else. And there's some things you can only know by going through and eventually climbing out of the dip, chapter 3. So what do you do, though, when you're right now sitting here in chapter 1? Well, you do the Habakkuk, which means, okay, you wrestle with God. You be honest with God. Listen, God's big enough. He already knows. It's not like you're keeping a secret from God if you confess what's already in your heart. He wants you to be honest with him. But you don't turn your back on God. That's the key. Wrestle with God. Don't turn your back on God. Be honest with God. You hold on. You wrestle back and forth, and you might even say, God, I don't understand, but I'm still going to embrace you. And you never let go, because no matter what happens, and I can promise you, I can't promise you a better life necessarily, right? But I can promise you this. God will never let go of you. He just won't. Habakkuk, okay, here's where you like the nice story where it all sums up, and I don't have one. Because sometimes in chapter 1, all you can do is continue to wrestle, but continue to embrace. And so I want to close our time today by just praying with you. And I know some of you would say, okay, listen, I'm facing some things that don't make sense. Maybe they're small, maybe they're huge. But you know, maybe you'd even say, I had a strong faith once. I remember what that felt like. But it's a little bit rattled right now. And Dennis, I'm trying to hang in there. I am. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm listening. That's why I'm watching. I'm not giving up, but it's hard. And some of you just say, you know, I really do believe, but man, I'm not sure what to do with this. I don't know how to reconcile. I'm in chapter 1. I hate chapter 1. And I love chapter 1 too, because I know that's where God's doing something. And those are the times you really learn to trust God. So I want to just pray with you this morning that those that are here would even feel the permission maybe to push back some and to ask the hard questions of God, to bring your real self to him, but still have the faith to know, to choose that God is big enough to handle even our doubts and questions. And if that's you, okay, you're stuck in chapter 1 this morning, I want to encourage you. Just as I pray, just admit that to God, just in your own words. Just be honest with God with where you're at right now. And maybe that's the only thing you know even to pray right now. And listen, that's a great place to start. God, I don't get it. God, I don't like it. God, if I were you, I'd do it differently. I'm lost. I don't understand why you're not doing more. But God, I trust you. That's what God wants to hear from you more than anything else. I trust you. And maybe today, because I don't have any other choice, but regardless, I'm choosing to trust you through the dip, believing you're going to bring me out. So, Father, I just pray today specifically for those who find themselves in this spot, in this chapter 1 stage of life still. God, we thought we'd be out of it by now. We thought that we'd be through this a long time ago, but here we are. We still have questions. We still have doubts. Many of us are still struggling with some stuff. And so, God, I just pray that as you hold on to them, that they would learn through this process what it really means to hold on to you too. God, would you just give them a sense of your presence in their lives in a way that only you can? God, use that even through maybe the increasing feeling of going deeper into the dip. God, use that to embolden us, to give us courage to trust in ways that we haven't done before. God, to stretch us beyond borders that we haven't been willing to go before in our faith and in our trust in you and with each other. And through that, God, we know there is a bigger story at play. So God, we trust you.